Hi, thank you all for joining me today. My name's Alice and I work for the Information Lab. I've been training as part of the data school for the past 2 months. And today I'm going to be going through table calculations in Tableau with you. So if you've got any questions at any point, please just put them in the chat and we'll answer them as we go along. But you also have a chance at the end to ask any questions that you may have. So I'm just going to go through first the schedule of today with you. So first, we're going to go through what are table calculations. Then we'll look at why table calculations is so useful, how we can implement them, and we're going to go through some examples of commonly used and extremely useful table calculations. So the first thing that we're going to look at, as I mentioned, is what are table calculations? So a table calculation is a calculation done on data in the view. So it only takes into account what is in the view, and it doesn't have a concept of anything outside of that. They don't add any additional data, they just view the data in a different way. I think one way of figuring out what table calculations are is seeing what they are not. So we're going to compare them to a basic calculation. The standard definition from Tableau would be basic calculations are written as part of the query created by Tableau and therefore are done in the underlying data source. Table calculations are performed after the query returns and therefore can only operate over values that are in the query result set. So the way that I see this is what the calculation is done on is different. So for a basic calculation, you have the data set, then you do the calculation on that data set, and then you create a view. With a table calculation, you have the data set, then you create the view and you do the calculation on what's in the view. So a question to keep in mind to ask yourself is, do I already have all the data values that I need on the visualization? If the answer is yes, then you use a table calculation. If the answer is no, then you use a basic expression. An example of this is if I have a data set on the number of tourists in France over the past 5 years, if I wanted to see, if I had a view that was just 2017, even though I had data for 2016, if I filtered for only 2017, then I wouldn't be able to see the percentage difference or any change compared to the previous year for 2017, because I don't already have all the data values that I need on the visualization because I'd filtered out the previous year. So why are table calculations so useful? I think we've all seen data like this before. I don't know how you feel about them, but I find them extremely hard to comprehend. I think it's quite flummoxing. It's just lots and lots of numbers for me, especially when we get to 7-digit numbers. It's really hard to see a relationship. It's hard to gain any insight. It just looks like a mass of numbers, and I wouldn't know where to start with it. So this is where table calculations become really helpful, because they help us see relationships, gain insight, and just have a bit of more context in some cases. So here I've made a table calculation on the same data. So what this has done is we're now looking at the percentage of total. So immediately I'm getting a bit more insight. I can see that for Q1 in 2016, machines account for 34% of sales. And I can see that we've got some categories, some subcategories, such as fasteners, which just generally don't do as well. This is a bit harder to see in just the numbers because although, yes, they are a much smaller number, it's hard to tell that because the length of the number doesn't always mean something. If here we've got 5 digits, if we had 6 ones, it would seem the same length. So it's a bit hard to tell just based on that. So having it as a table calculation just makes it that bit easier to see. Table calculations can be useful if you want to see year-on-year change or the running total of your sales of a product. There are so many ways that you can use a table calculation to gain a new perspective on your data. So next we're going to see what table calculations there are. We've got percent of total, percent difference, running total, moving average, difference percentile, rank, year-to-date total, year-on-year growth, year-to-date growth, and percent difference. The ones which I've put in bold are the ones that we're going to be going through today. So that's percent of total, percent difference, running total, and moving average. So if everybody could please open up a new Tableau workbook. So we'll just have a new one open. Today we're going to be using Superstore. For those of you that haven't used it before, it's one of Tableau's standard data sources. So if we are all on the home page, I'll just give you a few seconds to get that up. We have on the left-hand side panel, right at the bottom in saved data sources, we can see sample Superstore. We may all have different versions of this. That's no problem at all. So I'll go very slowly over each step and I'll give advice on how to check that your figures are being computed the way that you want. So I'm just going to open this by double clicking over sample Superstore, and then it's going to open what I want. I'm just going to go back into data source. So on the bottom toolbar, we can see data source in the corner, left bottom, and I'm going to select this. I just want to go through with you what the sample Superstore is looking at for those of you who haven't used it before. So it's basically a company that does lots of online orders. They look at furniture, technology, and office supplies. The information we have is what city, country, state, all those types of things. The sales, the profit, and quantity of orders. So now that we've done that, I'm just going to open up a new sheet. I'm going to go back to the workbook that I've made as it has some examples, but yours should be blank sheets, and that's completely normal. So the first table calculation that we're going to be looking at is the percent of total. So percent of total looks at a field and it sees how the parts of it contribute to the grand total. So in this example, we're looking at different categories and we're seeing how they relate to one another to get the total. So here, what we can see is that furniture brought in, so this is profit, it brought in 18,000 profit. Office supplies brought in 122,000 profit, and technology brought 145,000 profit. And the grand total of that was 286,000 profit. So here we just looked at the percentage of total of profit. I haven't explained how to do the calculation yet. I just wanted to give an overview of what total percent of profit means. So one way that we can check that it's being calculated correctly is what I wanted to show you as an example of the checks that we can do. What I do is I actually just use a calculator. So I'm just going to go and open up a calculator. And I'll use office supplies as an example. So here we can see that office supplies had 122,000 profit. So I'm just going to go and type that in. And the total profit was 286,000. And then I'm just going to make that a percentage. So we can see that the total percent of profit was 42.77%, and that's correct here. So we can see that this is being calculated correctly. So now I'll move on and I will run through with you how to do this calculation. So this looks a bit more intimidating, but it's actually exactly the same principle. So here we're looking at the percentage of total profit broken down by subcategory for each year. So we're looking at category and subcategory over the years 2016 to 2019. It's completely fine if you don't have the same years. Again, it's the principle and concept that we're doing. So if the numbers aren't exactly the same, it's really no problem at all. So I'm just going to duplicate this sheet. I'll show you how to do that, but obviously you don't have anything to duplicate right now. So I'm going to my tab. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go up and select duplicate here, where it's highlighted in blue. Now I'm going to clear the sheet, obviously, because I want to start afresh. So I'm going up to the toolbar and this sheet that has a little cross on it, I'm going to select that. So as I mentioned, we want to see category and subcategory by the past 4 years. So I'm going onto our dimensions pane. and I'm going to select order date, and I'll drag that to columns. If you could follow along while I do this, that'd be wonderful. So I'll just give you a few seconds to catch up. So what I did is I dragged order date from dimensions to columns. Next, I go back to dimensions and I select category, and I'm going to drag that to rows. I'm going back to dimensions again, and I'm going to select subcategory, and I'm going to bring that next to category to the right. So now I have the format of my table, and I wanted to look at profit. So I'm going to go into measures, and I'm going to double click on profit. Perfect. So now I've got my profit for each of the 4 years by each subcategory. To change this to a table calculation, we can see that as soon as I clicked profit, the field went onto the marks card. So I'm going onto the marks card where it says sum of profit. I'm going to hover over it, and on the right-hand side, I can see a little drop-down arrow appears here. I'm going to select that arrow. I'm going to go down to the bottom, and it says quick table calculation. If at any point I'm going too quickly, please say in the chat, and I'll go a bit slower, or I can go over things again. After going to quick table calculation, I'm going down to percent of total. So now I'll select that. Perfect. So it's definitely done something. We can now see that the table, instead of being whole figures, is percentages instead. But I don't actually know how it's calculating this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add back in profit. I consider this best practice because it just helps me to see what I'm actually calculating. So I'm going to go back into measures, and I'm going to double click profit. And now I can see I've got profit on the right, and I've got percent of profit on the left. So although this helps me to see what the numbers were, it doesn't help me to see how the numbers are being calculated without me actually having to manually calculate it myself. So I always try to add totals into the view. I'm going to show you 2 ways to add totals. I think it's best practice, so I do recommend it. First is going into our toolbar at the top and going to analysis. Okay, so we click analysis, and then we go down to the middle, and it says totals. And here you can choose what totals you'd like to see. You can show the row grand totals. So I'm going to select that now. And we can see here, okay, so a row is 100%. It's a bit easier to see if I remove profit. So for now, I'm going to go onto measure values, the measure values box under the marks card, and I'm going to remove profit. I'm just going to drag it off out of the box. Perfect. So now we can see that going across a row, it is 100%. I'm going to also add the column grand totals. If I go back to analysis, down to totals, and I go along to column grand totals. And then to remove them, I do the same thing. I go back to analysis, down to totals, and I can just unselect one. If I would like, you just click it again, and it will remove the tick next to it if we go back. Yeah, so now the tick is gone. But I'm just going to add that back in for now. So we can see that it's been calculated. So for example, for bookcases across the 4 years, add up to 100%. So the relationship we're seeing is how the different years relate to each other. So we can see that for bookcases, 16% of profit came from 2019, which is wonderful. But what we wanted to see is across a year, so across 2019 as a whole, how did the subcategories relate to each other? So now what I need to do is I need to see how it's being calculated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to where I made my table calculation on the marks card. We can see here there's a triangle next to profit. And this shows that this is how Tableau shows that a table calculation has been made on this field. So I'm going to select the drop-down arrow again, and I'm going to go down to compute using. Now I can see there are different options for compute using. There's compute using table across, compute using table down, table, pane down, pane, cell, category, order date, and subcategory. So what does this mean? Okay, well, so first I'm going to explain to you the definitions of cell, table, and pane. So a cell is an individual. It is where a row and a column intersect. So it would be the same as in Excel, where A1 is a cell. Bookcases in 2016 would count as a cell. So I'm just going to check the chat. Okay, perfect. So that seems to be okay. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Claire. So, right, sorry. So I'm just going to explain the different definitions. So as I mentioned, so a cell would just be bookcases for 2016. Another cell would be bookcases 2018. A pane is going to be within a table if it's divided by anything else. So here we can see that a pane would be for the different categories. So this is a pane, and we can see that there is an extra line in the table, and it's dividing it as a group. So furniture has its own pane, office supplies have their own pane, and technology have their own pane. A table is the table as a whole. So the whole thing here, all of the data is within this table. So I'm going to try and illustrate what they mean by the different pane down options. Right, so here we can see table going across just means that across one row, that's how it's calculating. In the instance of percent of total, it means that one row would be the equivalent of 100%. Table across and then down means that a calculation will be done across the table and then down a row and then across the table again. So this would be useful in an instance such as if we had months going across. So we had January to December, and then going down we had years. So we might have 2016 January to 2016 December, and then you would go down a row to 2017 January because it's continued. So they have a relationship with one another. Table down and then across would be going down a table, then along a column, back to the top. So this would be useful, for example, if we had it by quarter going down, and then we had year going across. So we could have for example, quarter 1 in 2013 down to quarter 4 in 2013. Then it would go back up to the top. We'd have quarter 1 in 2014 because the numbers still relate. So this would be useful for something such as if we had percent difference, because we would still want to see, okay, in 2014, quarter 1, how does it compare to 2013, quarter 4? Then we can see pane down. So pane down is just interested in the information in the pane. So it will be comparing all the information in the pane, and it will just stop once it gets to the end of that pane. Then pane across and then down would be going across the pane and then down a row to the first column of the row below. It's the same as table across and then down, except that once it gets to the end of the pane, it will stop. And then pane down and then across is a similar concept. Okay, so now we'll go back to what we were doing. So here we can see that it is being computed table across. And what we just learned is that we would need to change it to compute using table down so that 100% would be going down a column. So each column should add up to 100% instead of each row. To change that, we're going into our marks card. We're going to select the drop-down arrow again by profit. And when we go down to compute using, we're going to just change that and we are going to select table down. Okay, is everybody with me? Wonderful. Okay, perfect. So now we have our calculation. We can see how each subcategory relates to one another for profit in each of the different years. So if you could please rename this sheet. So to do that, we can just double click here. If you go to the tabs at the bottom, if you just double click and it will come up as an option, and we're going to name this percentage of total profit broken down by subcategory for each year. So percentage of total profit broken down by subcategory for each year. Okay, I'll just give you all a second to do that. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to be doing is we are going to look at the percentage of total sales broken down by segment for 2017 to 2019. So this is just another practice. And so this one is looking at sales and segments. Here you'll notice that we also do not have 2016 data included, so I'm going to teach you how to filter. So I'll just duplicate the sheet again. Once again, I'll just right click on the sheet, go up to duplicate, and then I'm going back to the toolbar to clear my sheet. So it's because I already have the sheet. Please do not delete anything that you've just done. So here we're going back into dimensions and we're going to select order date and drag that to columns. Then we're looking at segment. So we're going back to dimensions. We're going to drag segment onto rows. Perfect. And then we were looking at sales. So we're going back into measures and we're just going to double click on sales. So we also wanted to filter this. So I'm going to take order date and I'm going to drag it onto the filter shelf here. Okay, does everyone see? It's in the pane in between the worksheet and the data pane. Now we get this option that pops up. I'm going to select years, which is the third one down, and then I will select next. And I'm just going to unselect 16. So we just keep the ones ticked that we want to include. And then I'll go to the bottom and I will select OK. So now we have our base table. Even if you're making a chart, I always recommend making a base table first, just so that you can see the calculation and you can keep track of what you're doing. So similarly with the other one, we're just going back onto the marks card. We will select the drop-down arrow on sales. We will go to the bottom and select quick table calculation. And then we're going to select percent of total. So now I'm going to go back here. We can see that it's got the triangle that indicates that it's a table calculation now. I'm going to click the drop-down arrow again, and I'm going to go down to compute using, and I'm seeing that it's going compute using across. Now I would have already been able to see that if I'd have added my totals. So to keep track of it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my totals. I'll do it the other way that I have not shown you yet. So where we have our data pane, I'm going to, instead of data, I will select analytics. And then under summarize, I'm going to double click on totals here. So we go the pane next to data, we've got analytics, and then I'm going to double click on totals. So now I can see that it's been calculated going across. Whereas as with the last one, I want it to be calculated going down. So I'll go back to my marks card, select the drop-down menu, go down to compute using, and then I want to see table down. You'll notice that for this one, I had it colored. I just thought it made it a bit easier to see. In order to do this, I just dragged the field that I was looking at to the colors on the marks shelf. So I'll just show you how to do that. Currently, we're still in analytics in our pane on the left, so I'm going to select data so that we're back to that. And I'm going to go select segment and drag that to color. You can alter the colors how you like. If you click on the color box on the marks card and select edit colors, you'll come up with an option. You can select whatever colors you would like. Right. So next, what I would like to do is I would like you to make this, I would like to show you how to make this a graph. So one way that we might want to see this is we might want to see it in a way that's a bit easier to process. So in order to do this, we are going to look at what we had just made, and we're going to just change that slightly. So this one is looking at the percentage of total sales broken down by segment for 2017 to 2019. Oh, sorry, I would just like to go back and make sure that we've named the sheet that we were just working on, that we just colored, to percentage of total sales broken down by segment for 2017 to 2019. So it's just what's up here at the top. So we're just going to rename that. Perfect. Okay. So now to make it something like this, sorry, what we are going to do, so I'll just give you a few seconds to do that. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the sheet that we just changed the title of, and we're all going to duplicate it. So as I mentioned, we'll click on the sheet, we'll right click, we'll go up to duplicate, and now we have the sheet again. So what we want to do is, because we're splitting it by segment, we are going to drag our table calculation next to segment on the row shelf. Then we would be dragging segment to color, but as we've already done that, I'll show you anyway. So we would just drag segment onto the marks card where it says color. So now this isn't actually that helpful a view. We also still have grand total showing, so I just need to remove that. So I'm going to go into analysis at the top in the toolbar. I'll go down to totals, and I just need to unselect each of these. So analysis, totals, and then we just need to unselect them. Wonderful. So this line chart isn't that helpful. It doesn't really help us to visually see what's happening. So I'm going to go over to the marks card and I'm going to change the chart type. I want to try and make this a bar. So now we can see it all adds up to 100% for each year. And that's incorrect because it should be adding up to 100% for each segment instead. Right, so it's changed our calculation. So what we need to do is we go into our rows and we select the drop-down menu again, exactly the same as when it was in the marks card. We're going to go down to compute using, and this time we're going to select by segment. I'm just going to double check that. Right. So what I would like to do as well is I'd like to turn the bars around, just to have a bit of extra space. So I am just going to go to the tool bar at the top, and where we can see the option of the right angle, I'm just going to select that. So next to the clear sheet option. And then it's not using space that well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go along to where it says standard. I'll click the drop down and I'm going to select entire view. Now this is extremely useful because we can see a visual, but I would also like to just have the numbers included. So on the marks card, I'm going to select label and I'm going to tick show mark labels. So now I also have the percentages, which means that if I wanted to, I could remove the axis that's showing what percentage each of them have, but I'll just leave that for now. So now we're going to try it again. This one's slightly less neat, but it's more just showing you how it could be done. So this will be looking at the percentage of total of sales for each region broken down by month in 2018. So we're looking at the percentage of total of sales for each region broken down by months in 2018. Right. So right. So what I want to do is I'm just going to make this a table first, and it should look approximately like this. So I'm going to recreate this because I think no matter what you're doing, you should always make it a table first. It doesn't take too long and it can save you a lot of hassle because it means you can understand what you're doing and it avoids some errors. I'm just going to duplicate this sheet. We haven't made this yet, so you will not be duplicating it. And then I am going to clear it. Right. So we just want to see order date. And I will drag that onto columns. Please follow along with this. So we're taking order date and we're bringing it to columns. And then normally we've been looking at year, but I want to change this. So now we're looking at a month level. So where we see the year field up here, it has a drop down. And we can see that currently it's selected on year. I'm going to go 2 down from that and select month. Sorry about that. And then we're going to be looking at regions. So I'm going to go back to dimensions on the left, and I will take region and pop that onto rows. And then I will go to measures and double click on sales to populate the table. So here we can see overall for each month and region what the sales have been. We just wanted to see 2018. So again, we're going to add a filter. So we're going to go onto order date and drag that onto filters. And then we're going to select years and OK. And we just want to see 2018. So I'm just going to select 2018 and OK. Before I forget, we're just going to rename this. So if we double click on the sheet again at the bottom, and we're going to name it percentage of total of sales for each region broken down by month. So percentage of total of sales for each region broken down by month. Right, so I'm going to go back to our marks card and I'm now going to make this a table calculation. So on sales, we're going to select the drop down. We'll do a quick table calculation, and then we're going to select percent of total. Again, we have to check how this is being calculated. So I'll go to Analytics, the pane on the left, and double click Totals. So we can see this is going across, but this time that's what we want because we want to see how each region is being broken down over the year. So now to make this a chart, what we're going to do is we're going to drag sum of sales up to where region is. So we're adding it to the row shelf, and then we're going to drag region onto color. We should see that it's done the same thing again, so we can see the grand total. So we just want to go into analysis, analysis at the top in the toolbar, and then we're going to go down to totals, and we're just going to unselect show row grand totals and show column grand totals. So again, this is a bit of a mess. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a bar chart. So I'll go back to the marks card, drop down and select bar. we can see that this is not adding up to 100%. And in fact, it's being split. Oh, sorry, it's because we're splitting it by region, and instead we should be splitting it by month. So that's my mistake. So I'll bring region to columns, and I will bring month from the column shelf onto color. So now we can see that it's still not being calculated correctly. So we're going to go to our table calculation in rows, select the drop down and select compute using. And we want to compute it using order date because we want to see the calculation done across the different months. So now it looks more correct. We can see that they all add up to 100. But again, we just want to reformat this a bit so that we're making the most of our space. So I'm going to go to standard again at the top, and we're going to select entire view. And then we're also going to transpose the data. So we're going to go along the toolbar again and select transpose. And then if we also wanted a bit more information so that we can see the specific numbers, we can go to label in the marks card and select show mark labels. So that's on percent of total. Now we're going to be moving on to look at percent difference. Okay, so percent difference, there's several types that you can do. You can do percent difference from previous. So that would mean if we're looking at 2018 data, I could look at January compared to 2017 December. We could look at first. So if I was just looking at 2018, I could see each of the months compared to the first month. So January, I could compare each of the months to the most recent month, or I could compare each of the months to the next month, so the following month. So first, I'm going to create this view. Again, I find it helpful to keep the metric itself in there. So if we're looking at the percent of difference of profit, I find it useful to still keep profit so that we can check the numbers using a calculator or however we like. So this is looking at the monthly percentage difference of profit over 2018 for each ship mode. So we're just going to, I'm going to be duplicating this, but if you could create a new sheet, that would be wonderful, please. And we're just going to name this one, if you could all rename it now, please. We're going to name it monthly percentage difference of profit over 2018 for each ship mode. So the title is at the top. If I just spoke a bit quickly, the title is at the top of the sheet. Right. So we're going to drag order date to columns. And again, we're looking at a monthly level. So we're going to select the drop down, and we are going to go to month, which is just 2 below the one already selected, approximately in the middle of the drop down. We're looking at ship mode. So we're going to grab ship mode from the dimensions, and we're going to drag that to rows. And then we wanted to see profit. So we're going into measures and we're going to double click on profit. So what we wanted to see is the percentage of difference, and we want to see it compared to the previous month. So we're going to go down to the marks card again and select the drop down. We will click at quick table calculation, and we're going to select percent difference this time. Now we can see that now we can see that January has no data. So what we actually haven't done yet is filtered this for 2018. So I'm just going to go to order date, and I'm going to bring that onto the column shelf. So now we can see we've got 2016 January to December, 2017 January to December, and here we've got what we want, which is 2018 January to December. Here we can see that they have done a calculation. So January did have data in 2018. Now I'm going to drag year from the columns shelf to filters. Again, we're going to select years and next, and then we are going to select 2018. And then we'll click OK. The reason that January is missing is because, as I mentioned, calculations can only be done on what's in the view. So this goes back to if it should be a basic calculation or a table calculation. It has no concept of what was before the information in this view. It is only calculating on what's here. So it will not know that we do have data for 2017 December. Again, if you don't have the same years as me, that's fine. Select any year as long as it's not the first year. So one way to get this back into the view is, instead of filtering out all the other data, we can just hide it so that it's still technically in the view, we just don't see it. And this is quite a good workaround for if your boss has asked for something, or if for some reason you need to do a calculation that has all of the information, but you can't show all the previous information. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit our filter. So we're going into filters. We will select the drop down on our filter. And the first one, we'll select edit filter. So I'm just going to add back in 2017. So our table calculation will be done on 2017 and 2018. And then I'm going to select OK. But it's currently aggregating my data, so I need to add year back into my view so that it's not just calculating the total for me. So I need to drag order date onto columns. So now I've got them split by year and then further split by month. So we can see that now we have figures for January. If we don't want to show 2017, what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the title that says 2017, hover over that, and then right click. And the third option down, we're going to select hide. And this is a great workaround because it means it still has a concept of the information we just hid, but we don't have to view it. So that's how we can do this. If we go back into our calculation on the marks card and we select the drop down, we see an option that we didn't have for the percent of total, and that's relative to. And this is where we can select what we want to be comparing our figure to. So at the moment, we're comparing it to previous. So it's being calculated along the different months for each ship class, for each ship mode. And we're comparing it to the previous month. So March 2018 is being compared to February 2018. The other option would be next. So you'd be comparing March to April, or you can compare to first. So in this case, you'd be comparing all the following months to January. As we're running a bit short on time, I'm just going to show you that in this sheet. So if I wanted to make the change, I could select first, for example, and I would need to change what it's computing by. So I would go back in and I would select compute using ordered date. For some reason, that's not working. I'll show you in the example that I had made for you here. Right, relative to, yeah, okay, perfect. So instead, we're going to make a new sheet. So if you could all please open up a new sheet. And we're going to name this one percentage difference of quantity since the January 2019 for each region. If you don't have 2019, that's no problem at all. Just name it accordingly for whatever year you do have. Okay. So here what we're looking at is for each region across the year in 2018, how does it compare to the first month? And this is for quantity. So I'm going to duplicate my sheet. Hopefully you've all made your sheet now. And I want to see date, so I'm going to drag order date to columns. I do want to see year, but I'm also going to select further so that I can select month as well. So now it's showing quarter, but I just want to change that. So I'll select the drop down on quarter and I will change that to month. And then I wanted to see quantity. So I'll go to measures and I will select quantity. And then I also wanted to see region. So I will drag region onto rows so that it's showing me for each month in each year what region, and each region, what quantity is it. So now if I want to do my calculation compared to the first month, I will first filter it by just showing me 2019, just so that I don't have quite so many columns going on. So I'm going to drag order date to filters, and then I will select years and next. And then I just want to select 2019 so that I don't have to unselect all of them. I'm just going to select none here. And then I would just reselect 2019. And it also means that if we start getting new years, it won't just keep adding them, because if you select all, it will automatically add any new ones. If you select none, it will not add them. Right, so perfect. Now I have each month for 2019 by each region. So to do my table calculation, I'm going onto the marks card and onto quantity. I'll have a drop down. I will select my drop down, sorry, and I'll go to quick table calculation. Again, we want the percent difference, so I'll select that. And then I'm going to go back in to my table calculation and I want to select relative to. So we're going on the drop down again. We're going to select relative to, and then we want to select first. We can see here that these are all 0 because January is being compared to January. If we want to double check that what we're doing is accurate, we can just go back into measures and double click quantity again so that we can see the figures and we can do the calculations to see, okay, it was this in January, it's this in March, this is what the percentage of difference should be. So I'm just going to show you how you could make this a little bit easier to understand for anyone that you're showing. So I'm going to make it a heat map. I would first need to take quantity off of measure values just so that we're only looking at one calculation. So here on measure values, I'm just going to drag off quantity. And then I am going to, I'm just going to drop quantity onto color. So from the marks card, drag quantity, the table calculation that we've just made, onto color. Unsurprisingly, we have no color for January because it's being compared to itself. It's a bit hard to understand exactly what's going on from this mess of colors, so I always like to add a label back. So I'm just going to go onto label and select show mark labels, just so I can see a bit clearer what's going on. And then you can change your colors how you would like them. So we go onto the marks card and select color, and then we can select edit colors. You can select a palette if you would like, whichever palette, or if you just click on one of the colors on the left or right of the spectrum, you can choose the color yourself. So you can change it to stepped color if you'd like. If you wanted to make it 2 colors, you could do that so that you can have any that are above 0 being one color and any that are below 0 being another color. So now I can easily see, obviously this is not a great choice of colors, but I can easily see, okay, the ones highlighted in this brassy color are below and the ones that are in blue are above. I'm going to just quickly go over running total so that you've got a concept of how that goes, and then I'm just going to go over a few questions at the end. So running total is wonderful for if you want to see how a product is doing at certain at certain times in its life cycle. So if I am a book publisher, for example, and I want to see, okay, so this book went out in January 2017. I want to see how many copies of it in total I'd sold in April, and then a few months ago, and then today. So that's when running total can be really helpful. So we're going to create a new sheet, please. And then we're going to look at running total of quantity by segment from 2016 to 2019. Okay, so I'm just going to duplicate and clear my sheet, and then we're going to create that together. Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to drag order date onto columns. This is quite a quick one. And then I'm going to drag segment onto rows. And then I'm just going to go into measures and I will double click on quantity. So now in the marks card, I will select the drop down option for our quantity field and I will add a quick table calculation. It's the first one on there. I'm just going to click running total. It's hard to tell if this is right or not. So again, I'm going to go back into the measures and I'm going to double click on quantity. So now we've got both. I'm going to do the same thing with my calculator and I'm going to see if this adds up correctly. So I'll just look at consumer. So in 2016, it was 4,053. And then the next month it was 4,272, which added up to 8,325, and that is our figure there. So we can see that it is adding up correctly. And so now we have our running sum for each of those segments. I'm just going to make this a graph with you quickly, and then we'll go through some questions. So to make it a graph again, what we're going to do is we're going to take quantity, not the table calculation, just the regular quantity off of measure values. And then we are going to drag segment onto color, and we're going to drag quantity onto rows. Now, I'm just going to reformat this. So if we go into where it says standard again, I'm going to make it fit the entire view. I'm going to check how it's being calculated. So we're going to go onto our table calculation. We're going to go on the drop down and we're going to see compute using. So we want it computed using the segment. No, sorry. How did we compute this? We calculated, we calculated it using order date. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to click compute using order date. And then I'm just going to add the labels. So I always like to see the end result. So we're going to go into the marks card and select labels. We will select show mark labels. I only want to see the end one. So instead, where it says marks to label, I'll click line ends. And then in options, I will unselect label start of line. And now we've got our running sum of quantity. And we just have our last one labeled. So I'll just see if we have any questions currently. Is everything okay with questions? Okay, wonderful. So just to let you know, we do run other webinars and all details are on Meetup in Let's Talk Data. Thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. And yeah, thank you. I hope you have a lovely day and I hope you enjoy researching a bit more on table calculations. There's loads of great stuff online and I will be posting a blog on it as well. So if anyone's interested, we didn't have a chance to cover moving averages today, so that will be included in my blog. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.